Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode. And this week, the Q&A is going to be all around building phases. So I posted this on Instagram. Send me over your questions specifically around building phases. So then that way I can just see what people think and really dive into some things there. Looking forward to talking about that. I have probably 6-7 questions to go through on that. Still going to try to keep this to 20-30 minutes. We'll see. That's my goal. You'll obviously at this point know if I am able to do that or not. If you haven't yet, I have my free body recomp checklist. That's completely free. I go over what body recomp is, the 2 types of body recomp, why it's important, what people get wrong about it, and then how to actually set it up, right? The 10 things that I find that are most important there with that. So if you want that, again, it's completely free. Link to that is in the show notes. Go check it out. Let me know if you have any questions on it. All right. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So first question is, at some point, is a building phase needed to continue progress with a body recomp? So I just hit on, hey, if you go download my free body recomp checklist, there's 2 types of body recomp, right? Again, most people think of body recomp as specifically simultaneous fat loss and muscle gain, which that can happen. But a lot of times, to me, recomp is long-term, hey, we're building more muscle and we're losing some body fat, right? Like we're changing the shape of your body. We're recomping it. Your body composition is changing. Again, recomping. So the 2 types of body recomp are going to be, again, there's the overarching, hey, body recomp, that's our ultimate goal. But how do we specifically get that? Again, it's going to be done through specific phases where we're in a fat loss. So fat loss recomp. And then the other one is a building phase, a building recomp, right? And that can, fat loss is obviously in a deficit. How large that deficit is just really going to depend on where you're at. As far as the building recomp goes, you can be at maintenance or a small surplus, and maybe we are in a small surplus to start, and then we're not. Again, it's not one size fits all there. Is a building phase going to be needed to continue progress with the body recomp at some point? Absolutely. If you never do a building phase, you're never putting your body in the best spot to substantially change over time. So we need to rethink what a building phase is, right? It's not just gaining weight and adding muscle. It's much more than that. We're building your metabolism. We're continuing to build habits. We're building your performance. We're putting your body in the best spot to feel comfortable. And that's not going to be in an endless deficit. But here's the thing. People do these fat loss recomps and building recomps. But what they typically do is they'll do a fat loss recomp, but then they do a building decomp, right? A decomp where you get worse. And usually this is accompanied by, hey, really on top of things in the fat loss. Now they're done with that, or they're not really seeing progress as much as they want. So they tiptoe around that for months, not really seeing progress. They're doing it, but again, they're not going backwards because they're taking care of their health and fitness. But what does happen is when you're not doing that, then you just do whatever. You don't really care about what you're doing. Maybe you're now like half-assing things. Maybe your nutrition is just meh. You're not really doing much, but then training's the same way. And so what happens is you go backwards during that phase. You may gain a little bit of body fat and you don't really gain any muscle in that. So people will do that and then they go back and forth. So you already are doing this. So the 2 things that people do is they'll either always try to fat loss diet and end up being in this spot where they are at artificially low maintenance calories. So maybe you're not. So then you get stuck, right? But you're still on top of it. That's where people end up spinning their wheels. Or the second option, they do fat loss. They try to lose weight. They do that for a little bit. And then they go to this building decomp that I'm talking about where now they go backwards. And so what I want to try to do here is bridge this gap between, okay, we're fat loss dieting at times, if that's the right thing for you, then the rest of the time we're in a building recomp phase. We're not in a decomp, right? And the building recomp is, okay, you're not going to lose muscle or you're not going to lose body fat in the building side of things, but we're doing all those other things that I mentioned, which in turn is going to build you up to be able to fat loss diet more effectively and efficiently. And then long-term, you piece these together and you go in and out of them. And ideally we get to the point where you're not really fat loss dieting very often or for long periods of time. And that's where we live, right? And then what we work on specifically in that building phase really depends on where you're at, where you want to go, and what you have going on in your life. A lot of people might hear that and be like, man, is there ever a break? And your building phase can be paired with maintenance calories and you back off of things. Okay. Now, maybe we're going to have part of our building phase when we're outside of a fat loss we're really going to be dialed in. We're really going to be pushing adaptation and like changing your body, adding muscle, whatever it may be. But there might be periods where maybe you do that for 6 months. And then the last 3 months of your building phase, maybe you're now you're dialing back training, you're eating closer to maintenance, and you're maybe not tracking as in depth as you were before. But again, we're not going backwards. We're still making some progress. We're at least staying where we're at. But ideally, if we do the things right and we're effective and efficient with what we're doing, we can still move forward. It just may be a little bit slower than when you can really put a lot of time in. But that's going to bridge that gap to where now you're in a great spot and you want to go tighten things up and drop a little bit of body fat for 6 to 8 weeks, now you can go do it. And you can get ready for an event. You can get ready for a wedding. You can get ready for a trip in, say, 6 to 8 weeks at any point in time because you're managing those things outside of it. So absolutely, like, you are going to need to do a building phase at some point, and you already are if you're not, if that makes sense. It's just, are you actually doing things? Are you doing the things in the right amount that are going to lead to the results? Because I think a lot of times people think they need to do a lot, and that's where they get themselves caught up. So their quote unquote maintenance phase is they're actually going backwards. So I'm just trying to help people reframe that there. All right. So next is going to be, will cycling mini cuts and bulks make me gain less body fat in my bulk? So mini, we're talking, you're going to do a couple weeks fat loss dieting, then maybe 3 to 4 weeks or less in a surplus. Is that going to lead to you gaining less body fat? Sorry, let me make sure I understand this. Will it make me gain less body fat in my bulk? It may make you lose less body fat, but I feel like this would make it more likely that you build less muscle. Sorry, on the question I responded to, I said, if your inputs suck, I would say it may lead to less body fat in your bulk if your inputs suck. I'm just trying to make sure I understand that. But at the end of the day, will that approach lead to less body fat over time? And I would say that could happen, that you could lose less body fat, but where it's going to hurt you is you're probably going to build less muscle in that process. To me, does that make a lot of sense to do these mini cuts and bulks? I don't think so, for that reason. Now, if we're using these mini cuts and mini bulks to be like, hey, in those 3 to 4 weeks in the mini bulks, I'm just going to wing it. You're not on top of it. And then you need to clean up for 2 weeks. Then that definitely is like, that's going to set you back there. Right. So I'd much rather you find a sustainable surplus again, or even maintenance calories for many people, plus improving your inputs and staying there longer while minimizing, avoiding fat gain by doing that versus doing mini bulks and cuts. Because I really feel like there is a momentum thing when it comes to building muscle. I think if you can string together multiple months and weeks on top of each other of things that are going to put your body in a good position to build muscle, that's where you're really going to see faster muscle growth. Whereas muscle growth is already a slow process. And if you're just breaking it up every couple of weeks, to me, that's not going to build as much muscle. Again, it could be a strategy to lose less body fat, or to gain less body fat during that. But again, I've also talked about, we don't necessarily have to be in a surplus in our building phase. And if our inputs are right, we should be limiting fat gain anyways, if we decide a small surplus is right for you in your current building phase. Really, where these become like people need them is when they just wing their building phases and they just eat way too much food there. And so again, keep this in mind. You could do a small surplus for a short period of time, gain a little weight, then transition to maintenance calories. So that's also what we could do here in a building phase. And one thing I've changed my mind on is, okay, maybe initially you're at 155, maybe you gain up to 160 to 165, but once you get closer to that 165 weight range, now you just go to maintenance calories and your body's in a good spot to build muscle, and you can keep that momentum going without having to cut and break it up. So again, you don't have to be in a surplus the entire time. To me, that's something that I've changed my mind on over time, where it's like people end up gaining more body fat in their building phases because they feel like they need to be in a surplus the entire time. When I've made the point that you might not even need to be in a surplus at all, but even if you do need it for a little bit, you don't have to be in it forever. So hopefully that makes sense. Next question is, what's the minimum amount of time I should spend in a building phase? It's hard to put an exact number on it, right? Because it's going to depend on the individual person and their current goal and what is the goal of the building phase, right? So as I've talked about, a building phase is more than just gaining muscle and just gaining weight, okay? There's other ways that we can utilize a building phase. So let's talk here about this, and then I'll give you exact numbers. What is the goal of our building phase? As I said earlier, it's not just gaining muscle and gaining weight. One, we don't have to gain weight. That may be a byproduct of, you may gain a little bit of weight if you're at maintenance and you're training really well and you're putting your body in a good position to build muscle. You may gain a little bit of weight, but I'm talking this like forced weight gain where you're gaining X amount of weight per week and being in some sort of calorie surplus. So we know we already don't have to do that. Ideally, most people need to build a little bit more muscle than what they have. And so ideally we would do that, but maybe for you, that's not a main goal. So I'm not really going to push that. But what we are going to do is we're going to do a building phase, building your metabolism, improving performance, getting habits dialed in, putting your body in a position where it feels comfortable, right? Because a deficit is a stressor on the body and it will adapt to that. So we need to get back to maintenance at some point. So maybe that's what we're using it for. And so what we could use that for is, maybe you're someone who needs to drop body fat. Okay. And you've got to the point where things really slow down. You weren't feeling great. Where do we change? Where do we go from here? So in that specific situation, the goal of the building phase could be, hey, we just need to take a break from a deficit and get you to maintenance calories for a little bit of time to do all those things that I just talked about, right? Restore hormonal function, just get you in a better, getting your body in a better position overall, right? Your body feels safe at maintenance calories. It's going to perform and feel its best there if we're doing the right inputs as well too, right? So we're going to build up, we're going to optimize your metabolism at that time. This doesn't mean we're going to increase it by a certain amount or on top of what's already at, but when we're in a deficit, we're not optimizing our metabolism long term. So we need to get back to maintenance at some point. So in that situation, the building phase could be 1 to 3 months. Okay. So we're not the goal of that one is not necessarily to add a bunch of muscle. Where on the flip side, you take someone who's leaner, they want to build a lot of muscle, and they just came off of fat loss dieting. They may be in a building phase for longer than 6 to 12 months or longer. Okay. Or maybe there's someone who they feel super lean, they feel good, they do want to build a little bit more muscle, but they don't want a fat loss diet for a while. Maybe for them, it's upwards of 2 years. So it just really depends on where you're at and what the goal is of it there. And so someone who still has some body fat to lose and is currently more fat loss focused, and they just need a break from a deficit, 1 to 3 months minimum, right? But if you want to build muscle, you're leaner, 6 to 12 months minimum on that, right? And then everything in between in terms of goals, right? I went on two ends of the spectrum there in terms of what people look at. So it's hard to put a number on it in terms of how long. It really depends on what the goal is. And again, the goal doesn't always have to be building muscle or gaining weight. And I think if we can come at it from that lens, it changes what the time frame is of it. Because people will say, oh, you need to be in it this long. And I talked about the momentum side of building, what that looks like. So again, if you fall on you're not trying to lose more body fat, but you want to build muscle, or you just want to take a break, like it could be 3 months, or again, it could be 6 to 12 months, and literally everything in between. All right. So I already answered this, but I just want to go over it again. So should you gain weight the entire time? So you go into a building phase, and should you gain weight the entire time? And no, you don't need to gain weight the entire time. So my fat loss phase, for example, I'm going to give you an example of what I did. So I ended it between 150 and 155. So then I slowly gained over months to 150 or 160 to 165. Okay. So I slowly gained to there. It probably slowed down around like 163. My weight really slowed down, right? There's this pretty consistent trend up over weeks of seeing it trend up over time. Again, it wasn't too quick because we don't want to go super quick because that will increase your risk of adding fat mass. And I definitely gained a little bit of body fat in that process. This wasn't 9 pounds of straight muscle, right? It was some glycogen, just food in my belly, as well as a little bit of body fat as well too. But for me, once I got to that 163-ish, I felt good. I didn't want to keep putting on more body fat. Training performance was going well. I felt good. I was able to have some flexibility with my nutrition where I didn't need to micromanage what I was doing. I wasn't tracking. And then from there, like all that lined up. So from there, I was just making sure I was eating enough protein, eating enough food, dialing in all the inputs that I know I needed to put my body in a good position to build muscle. And then over time, it slowly trended up to 164, 166 range. Okay. Now we're talking 6+ months at that point. So I went from October 2023 to I just started my fat loss phase a week ago at the beginning of May 2025. That's that time frame that happened, right? We're talking basically a year and a half of that. And so again, a lot of what I've done in the past was I ended at say 150 to 155 and I would just gain the whole time. So, I need to keep seeing my weight go up. So I push into the 170s, right? And it just led me to now, like when I go in fat loss diet, one, you have to spend more time because you're spending time dropping body fat that I didn't really necessarily need to gain in the first place. But you just have to spend more time fat loss dieting and then it's harder to get as lean as you want to get there, right? So that's why I decided to change it this time around. So again, I just see too many people try to gain weight the entire time and they just end up with more body fat, whether they gain weight on accident because they're just being super lenient with what they're doing, or they feel like they need to do that in order to build muscle. And I think both of those are wrong there. But again, this gives you more time to not be in a deficit, which equals more muscle growth there. So hopefully that makes sense. So next question is, what would you say people overlook when building? And I said there, one, training stimulus plus intensity of training. Okay. So training stimulus being, whatever we're trying to do, we understand what adaptation, what stimulus we're sending to the body. So if you want to do more cardio, because again, remember, not all building phases have to be about building muscle or maximizing muscle. It can be, and that's what a lot of people want to do. You might as well take advantage of that. So are you doing that? Or are you doing like some sort of like HIIT style training? Again, that's fine, but are you sending the stimulus that you want to for that? And then also the intensity of training. So I'm going to take the rest of the time, I'm going to take this from, okay, you're eating enough food. You probably want to focus at least a little bit on adding some muscle, right? How far you want to go on that really depends. So we're making sure we're sending the right training stimulus and that, making sure that we're sending the signal to build more muscle. So we do that by making sure you train close enough to failure. We're doing enough training volume, not too much, but we're doing enough. We're choosing the right exercises and we're progressively overloading over time. And then obviously we're also making sure that the intensity of training is there. So however we have our program set up, it's allowing you to be able to push it so you can send that stimulus and get more out of your workouts in less time. Also, people they overlook their nutrition, right? So they usually are way more relaxed or they just wing it. It's just, I'm in a building phase, so I can just chill and do whatever I want. I'm not in a fat loss phase. So there's that. It's their macros aren't in check. Their meal timing's off. Their overall diet quality is not there. They're not, the meal timing in terms of around their workouts could be maximized, right? These are all things that people overlook in that process. Movement. This was me back in the day where it's like, I wanted to build muscle. So I was like, hey, I need to be in a surplus. So then I stopped moving as much outside of the gym. So we want to make sure we stay active and we're active throughout the day, not just in our 1 hour workout. Lifestyle, right? Poor sleep, high stress load on the body. You're putting yourself in a position where like you're just the kind of friend group you hang out with is just like maybe drinking a lot, stuff like that. Like you're just the environment you're in is not great. But again, we're talking poor sleep, poor circadian rhythm health, high stress load on the body, whether that be just high perceived stress, but then also high stress load on the body because maybe you're not sleeping well, maybe your meal timing's off, maybe you're eating too many calories, right? Like those are all stressors on the body. And then maybe from a training perspective, you're doing too much training, so you have a high stress load there. And then mindset, right? What is your mindset in this? Like, how are you paying attention to how your body responds to things and not necessarily what on the internet? You all or nothing with it, right? Like people are all or nothing during fat loss, but they can also be all or nothing during a building phase as well too, right? So are you working on the mindset side of things? And people, they overlook those things and then they're overly focused on the calorie surplus or their calorie intake, right? It's like, that's the thing that's going to drive it. I got to look at my calories. My macros are off. I got to look at my calories, but they're overlooking these 5 things. And these are all the 5 things. Like those are the 5 pillars that I focus on in the performance recomp method, right? Because I feel like people often overlook those. And again, it's just very calorie focused, or, hey, what's the training split? Or do I need to train to failure or not? Those are the questions people are asking. And those are good. We want to talk about those, but they put too much emphasis on those things and not those other things that I talked about. All right, so we got 2 more questions here on the building phase. Do I have to bulk if I want to build muscle? And the answer is no. I've talked about this, like we don't have to gain weight. We don't have to bulk up if you want to build muscle. Now, if you're leaner, have a good amount of muscle already, and you want to maximize muscle growth, then you'll likely need to get into a small surplus at some point. And again, that surplus doesn't necessarily have to be you gain the entire time. It could be, hey, for a short amount of time, we are going to gain a little bit of weight on purpose. And then from there, but now we're going to go to our maintenance. And again, where that number is at is really dependent on the person, right? So for example, I have a client, Luke, he's already pretty jacked and he's lean, and he was at 180. For him, we've purposely gained his weight up into the low 190s, and we're going to keep pushing because his physique looks great. His training's going well, and he wants to continue to build more muscle. So it really depends on where the person's at and how their body's responding. But for someone else, they could be at 180, and maybe we get them up to 185 and 190. Now it's like, hey, let's just sit pat here for a while and really build some muscle, right? So it really just depends. But let's keep in mind, people overlook their inputs: training, nutrition, mindset, lifestyle, and movement. So we need to make sure those are dialed in on top of it. And then lastly, again, similar to other, but what's something people get wrong about a building phase? 1, it's just about building muscle, which we talked about. That's not the case. For most people, that is what we want to do and probably what we want to focus on at least a little bit, but it's not just about that. Again, you have to bulk, which I've talked about. You don't have to do that. There's a time and place for it, and it's very context dependent on if or when or how we do that. And you need to gain weight the entire time. Again, we can gain weight for a little bit and then slow it down versus gaining a lot of weight and then having to cut, or gaining for a while and then just gaining that entire time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing there. So hopefully that was helpful. Again, make sure you download my free body recomp checklist there. If you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, HOEHN __. And that's where I'm most active. I do Q&As as usually weekly. So you can ask me any questions on this podcast or in general. And then lastly, if you have found this podcast be helpful, if you could leave a rating and review, and that will help more people find it. Hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Talk to you soon.